If you're here right now, reading these words at this exact moment, something has already shifted in the architecture of your reality. And it didn't ask for your permission. You didn't plan this. You didn't sit down and decide that today would be the day your old frequency would begin to dissolve. But somewhere between last week and this breath, the field registered a change in your internal signal. The person you've been rehearsing for years, the one who wakes up tired, who repeats the same thoughts by 9 a.m., who promised to change and then fell back into the familiar groove, that version of you is no longer being reinforced by the quantum field. It's not collapsing because you failed. It's collapsing because you outgrew the resonance. And the strange thing is, you've been feeling it. The exhaustion that doesn't match your schedule. The silence where there used to be noise. The disinterest in goals that once felt urgent. You thought something was wrong. But what if that emptiness isn't the end of your story? What if it's the pause between two timelines, the moment before a new probability locks into place? This isn't another motivational talk. This is a map for the crossing. You've probably heard that reality is a reflection of your inner state. But no one told you that the hardest part isn't choosing a new future. It's enduring the gap between who you were and who you're becoming. Because right now you're living in quantum superposition. Multiple versions of you exist at once in the field of potential, but only one collapses into form based on the frequency you return to most often. And here's the truth most spiritual content skips. Your body doesn't care about your vision board. Your nervous system was built for survival, not transformation. So even when your mind wants change, your biology pulls you back to the emotional signature you've been practicing since childhood. The same anxiety at sunrise, the same doubt before decisions, the same fatigue that has nothing to do with how much you slept. This isn't weakness. This is chemistry. Your cells have been soaking in the same emotional cocktail for so long that they've become addicted to it. And now, as you try to step into a higher timeline, your body is going through withdrawal. The exhaustion you feel isn't failure, it's recalibration. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how to move through it. Not by forcing, but by becoming the observer who chooses a new collapse point. Breath by breath, morning by morning. Here's what quantum physics discovered in the laboratory, and what you've been living without knowing. You are not one fixed self moving through time. You are a field of possibilities. And every morning when you open your eyes, the universe is waiting to see which version of you will collapse into form. In the quantum world, a particle exists in superposition, everywhere and nowhere at once, until the moment it's observed. Then it chooses. But here's the part that changes everything. The particle doesn't choose randomly. It collapses based on the expectation of the observer. And in your life, you are both the particle and the observer. You are the field of infinite potential, and you are the one collapsing it into a single timeline every time you return to the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same identity you've been rehearsing since you were young. Think of it like this. Imagine a silent laboratory where a scientist watches a particle suspended in space. The particle could be anywhere, left, right, up, down, but the moment the scientist looks, expecting it to appear on the left, it does. Not because the particle obeys the scientist, but because observation itself is a creative act. The field responds to the question you're asking with your attention. And right now, if you're waking up every day and immediately asking, who was I yesterday? What do I need to worry about? What's wrong with my life? The field hears that question and hands you the same particle, the same version of you, over and over again. The film starts from the same scene because you keep pressing play on the same memory. This is why affirmations alone don't work. This is why vision boards gather dust, because you can say, I am abundant, I am free, I am new. But if your body is still vibrating with the emotional frequency of lack, of fear, of the old story, the field doesn't register the words. It registers the signal. And your nervous system has been trained for years to broadcast one channel, survival. It learned early that anxiety keeps you safe, that control prevents disaster, that smallness avoids rejection. So even when your mind reaches for a new reality, your body pulls you back to the frequency it knows. You end up in the same arguments, the same job frustrations, the same inner exhaustion, not because you're broken, but because you keep observing yourself through the lens of who you were. But here's the opening, the edge of the new timeline. The moment you stop participating in that observation, The moment you catch yourself mid-thought and pause, you create a gap. And in that gap, before the old identity rushes in to fill the silence, a new version of you exists in pure potential. It's not built yet. It has no history. It's just there, waiting. And the more you return to that gap, in the morning before the day takes over, in the pause before you react to a text message, in the breath before you repeat the familiar complaint, the more you train the field to collapse toward that new frequency instead of the old one. So here's the practice, and it's simpler than it sounds. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you run the mental list of problems, sit at the edge of your bed and ask a different question. Not, what's wrong, but who am I becoming? Not, what do I need to fix, but what frequency am I choosing to broadcast today? You don't need an answer. You just need to disrupt the automatic collapse, because the old timeline doesn't dissolve through effort. It dissolves through withdrawal of attention. Your body is not your enemy, but it is an archive. Every emotion you've ever felt repeatedly has left a chemical signature in your cells, and over time, those cells began to expect that same signature to arrive every morning like clockwork. This is why you can wake up anxious before anything has even happened. Your body isn't responding to the present moment. It's replaying a recording from the past. It learned that anxiety meant survival, that worry kept you prepared, that stress proved you were responsible. And now, even when your life is relatively safe, your biology keeps playing the same emotional soundtrack, because that's the only song it knows. Neuroscientists call this emotional conditioning. Spiritual teachers call it energetic patterning. But here's the simple truth. Your nervous system has been practicing one frequency for so long that it became your identity. You are not choosing anxiety each morning. You are experiencing the momentum of 10,000 mornings before this one. And the field around you, the quantum field that arranges circumstances and synchronicities and the tone of your day, doesn't judge that frequency. It just mirrors it back. If you're broadcasting fear, the field reflects situations that confirm fear. If you're vibrating in lack, opportunities that require abundance feel out of reach, not because you're unworthy, but because you're tuned to a different channel. Think of your internal state like a radio station. You've been set to 98.5 FM, the survival station, for years. It plays the same songs. What if I fail? I'm running out of time. Nothing ever works for me. And every person you meet, every email you open, every thought you think gets filtered through that frequency. But the moment you try to switch to a new station, let's call it 102.3, the creation frequency, your body resists, because it doesn't recognize that signal. It feels dangerous, unfamiliar, and so it floods you with discomfort, with restlessness, with the urge to go back to what feels known, even if what feels known is suffering. This is the part no one prepared you for. Changing your frequency feels worse before it feels better. Your body will throw every alarm it has: tightness in your chest, racing thoughts, exhaustion, irritability. Because from its perspective, you're abandoning the strategy that kept you alive. But you're not in danger, you're in transformation. And the only way through is to let your body learn a new song, note by note, without forcing it. Here's one way to start. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Breathe slowly, 4 counts in, 6 counts out. And as you breathe, notice the emotion trying to take over. Don't fight it. Don't fix it. Just observe it like you're watching a wave pass through. That pause, that witnessing, is where the old pattern begins to loosen. Because the field doesn't respond to what you think. It responds to what you feel most consistently. And every time you choose calm over reaction, presence over panic, you're teaching your body a new frequency. There is a window that opens every morning right before your identity wakes up. It lasts maybe 30 seconds, sometimes less. You're conscious, but you haven't yet remembered who you're supposed to be. You haven't loaded the story yet. The one about what's going wrong, what you need to control, who disappointed you yesterday. In that brief opening, you exist in pure superposition. You're no one and everyone at once. And if you could learn to stay there just a little longer, you'd realize that this gap is where all transformation happens. Most people miss it completely. The alarm goes off, the hand reaches for the phone, And within seconds, the old self is back online, running the same program it ran yesterday. But what if you trained yourself to catch that gap? What if, instead of immediately checking messages or mentally listing problems, you sat at the edge of your bed and placed both hands over your heart, not to fix anything, not to force positivity, just to interrupt the automatic collapse back into the old frequency? Here's the practice, and it's deceptively simple. When you wake, before you stand, before you speak, take 3 slow breaths. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6. As you breathe, feel the weight of your hands on your chest. Notice the rise and fall. And in that noticing, ask yourself, what if I didn't continue yesterday's story today? What if the person I was last week isn't who I have to be right now? You don't need an answer. You just need the pause. Because in that pause, before thought rushes in, before emotion pulls you back into familiar patterns, you are standing in the quantum field as a free agent. No history, no identity, just presence. This gap exists throughout your day, not just in the morning. It appears in the second before you reply to a frustrating text. It opens in the breath before you walk into a difficult conversation. It's there in the moment between craving and reaching, between trigger and reaction. And every time you catch that gap and choose not to collapse immediately into the old response, you're training your nervous system to recognize a new option. You're teaching your body that it doesn't have to defend, prove, or perform. It can simply be. The ancient traditions called this the space between breaths. Modern neuroscience calls it the gap between stimulus and response. Quantum physics shows it as the moment before the wave function collapses. But the truth is simpler. It's the place where the old you loses power, and the new you can emerge, not through force, not through willpower, but through the quiet, repeated choice to pause before the pattern takes over. And each time you do this, you're not just changing your morning, you're rewiring the entire trajectory of your timeline. No one tells you this part. No one warns you that when you stop feeding your body the same emotional chemicals it's been consuming for years, it will go through withdrawal. Real, physical withdrawal. You'll wake up with a knot in your chest that has no external cause. You'll feel restless, irritable, like something is wrong even though nothing in your life has actually gotten worse. You might feel a strange emptiness where there used to be urgency, a flatness where there used to be emotional intensity. And your mind will tell you that this means you're failing, that you've lost your edge, that the old version of you was at least functional, and this new attempt at change is making things worse. But here's what's actually happening. Your cells have been addicted to stress hormones. For years, they've been bathed in cortisol and adrenaline, the chemical signature of fear and survival. Those chemicals became your baseline. And now, as you practice pausing, breathing, choosing a different internal response, your body is no longer getting its daily dose. It feels the absence the same way someone who quits coffee feels the headache, the fog, the craving. Your body isn't broken. It's adjusting. It's learning to run on a different fuel, and that transition is uncomfortable by design. Think of it like this. If you've been listening to loud music for hours and suddenly turn it off, the silence feels almost violent. Your ears ring. The quiet feels wrong, even threatening. But after a few minutes, you adjust. The silence becomes neutral, then peaceful. This is what's happening inside you. The emotional volume you've been living at, the constant low hum of anxiety, the background static of worry, has been turned down, and your nervous system is panicking because it mistakes peace for danger. The timeline matters here, because hope needs something concrete to hold on to. In the first 7 days of choosing a new frequency, your body will resist the hardest. It will throw every old emotion at you, trying to pull you back into the familiar loop. By day 10 or 12, if you've stayed consistent, even imperfectly, you'll notice small pockets of ease. A morning where you don't wake up anxious. A moment where a trigger doesn't land the way it used to. By 21 days, your nervous system begins to recognize the new pattern as safe. And somewhere around 30 to 40 days, the new frequency starts to feel like home. Not perfect, not without challenges, but no longer foreign. This isn't about willpower, it's about compassion. When the discomfort comes, place your hand on your body and say quietly, I know this feels wrong, but you're not in danger. You're just learning a new song. That acknowledgement alone interrupts the spiral. Because the field doesn't ask you to be perfect. It just asks you to keep choosing, one breath at a time, even when it feels like nothing is working. Here's what changes everything. The world around you is not a mirror reflecting your thoughts back at you. It's a projection screen, and you are the frequency being broadcast. The field doesn't wait to see what you think or what you say. It reads the tone you're transmitting before you open your mouth, before you make a decision, before you even form a conscious intention. And that tone is set by your heart. Research from the HeartMath Institute shows that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond the body. This field is measurable, powerful, and constantly in communication with the nervous systems of people around you. When you walk into a room anxious, people feel it before you speak. When you stabilize in calm presence, others unconsciously begin to regulate toward that frequency. You are not isolated, you are broadcasting. And the field is always listening, always arranging circumstances to match the dominant signal you're sending. Think of it like this. You're not living in a world that exists independently, waiting for you to navigate it. You're standing in the center of a resonance chamber. Every emotion you practice, every thought you return to, every state you inhabit most frequently, it echoes outward. And the chamber responds, not to punish you, not to test you, simply to organize itself around the frequency you've made most familiar. This is why two people can walk through the same day and have completely different experiences. They're not perceiving the same reality differently. They're collapsing different realities based on the field they're generating. But here's where responsibility becomes something sacred, not heavy. When you stabilize in a new frequency, peace instead of panic, trust instead of control, presence instead of projection, you don't just change your own timeline. You create a resonance pathway that makes it easier for others to access that same state. Not through preaching, not through convincing, just by being it. Your nervous system becomes a tuning fork, and anyone near you who's ready to shift will begin to entrain to that frequency without either of you saying a word. You've felt this before. You've walked into a space and immediately felt lighter because someone there was holding calm. Or you've been pulled into anxiety because the person next to you was spiraling, even though nothing was said. This is resonance, and it works both ways, which means every morning you choose peace over reactivity. Every moment you pause instead of collapsing into the old pattern. You're not just healing yourself, you're subtly altering the field for everyone in your orbit. That's not pressure, that's purpose. The field doesn't judge your past. It just responds to the tone you're choosing now. There's a state beyond fixing yourself, beyond improving, optimizing, or becoming a better version of who you were. It's the state where you stop trying to be anyone at all, and instead become like water, fluid, adaptive, free to take any shape the moment requires without losing your essence. In physics, superfluidity describes a state where matter flows without friction, without resistance. It moves through obstacles as if they weren't there, and this is the invitation waiting for you on the other side of all this work. Not to become someone fixed and perfect, but to become so present, so unattached to yesterday's identity, that you can collapse into any version of yourself the field calls for. Most people spend their entire lives defending oneself. I'm the responsible one. I'm the creative but disorganized one. I'm the one who struggles with money. And they organize every choice, every relationship, every opportunity around that single story. But what if that story was just one frequency you learned to broadcast, not the truth of who you are? What if, underneath the conditioning, you're not a fixed identity at all? You're the field itself, capable of collapsing into infinite forms depending on what the moment needs. Think of water. It can be ice when the temperature drops. It can be vapor when the heat rises. It can take the shape of any container without resisting, without needing to prove it's still water. It doesn't cling to being ice once the season changes. It doesn't grieve its time as vapor. It just flows. And this is what becomes possible when you stop collapsing back into the same version of yourself every morning. You begin to live as pure presence, choosing moment by moment which frequency to inhabit. Not based on fear, not based on who you were yesterday, but based on what wants to emerge right now. This doesn't mean you have no values. no preferences, no center. It means your center is no longer a rigid identity you have to defend. It's a still point of awareness that can move through roles, contexts, and seasons of life without clinging. You can be fierce in one conversation and soft in the next. You can lead in one moment and follow in another. You can hold ambition without attachment and rest without guilt. Because you've stopped confusing yourself with the roles you play. You've remembered that you are the one choosing, not the one being chosen by circumstances. The practice here is simple but profound. At the end of each day, before you sleep, sit quietly and ask yourself, who was I today? Not to judge, not to fix, just to observe. Notice the roles you inhabited, the frequencies you chose, the moments you clung to an old identity and the moments you let yourself be fluid, and then release it all. Let that version of you dissolve into the field, because tomorrow morning when you wake, you don't have to continue that person's story. You get to choose again, and again, and again. This is what it means to live as the field. Not fighting for one timeline, but flowing into the highest one available, breath by breath, choice by choice. You came into this video thinking something was wrong with you. That the exhaustion, the silence, the strange disconnect from your old life meant you were failing. But now you see it differently. The collapse you've been feeling isn't the end of your story. It's the clearing of space for a higher timeline to lock into place. The discomfort isn't evidence of weakness. It's your nervous system withdrawing from an old frequency and learning to run on a new one. And the emptiness you mistook for failure? That was the field opening, waiting for you to choose who you're becoming instead of defending who you've been. Everything you learned here is simple, but it's not easy. It asks you to catch the gap between waking and remembering, to place your hand on your heart when the old emotion rushes in, to observe without collapsing, to breathe through the withdrawal instead of running back to what feels familiar. It asks you to trust that the field isn't punishing you. It's recalibrating around the new tone you're learning to hold, and it reminds you that every morning is a rebirth. You are never condemned to repeat yesterday. The quantum field holds every version of you in potential, and the one that collapses into form is always the one you return to most consistently. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. Every small choice toward presence instead of panic, calm instead of chaos, witnessing instead of reacting. It compounds. And over time, those choices don't just change your internal state. They shift your relationships, your opportunities, the very texture of your days. Peace becomes your baseline. Clarity becomes your compass. And the life you've been reaching for stops feeling distant. It starts showing up in the ordinary moments, because you've finally become the frequency that matches it. So here's what I'm asking you to do in the next 24 hours. Choose one practice from this video and make it real. Maybe it's the morning pause before you reach for your phone. Maybe it's placing your hand on your chest when anxiety rises and breathing slowly until the wave passes. Maybe it's asking yourself at the end of the day, who was I today? And then letting that version dissolve before you sleep. Just one. Because transformation doesn't happen in the big moments. It happens in the small, repeated choices that your nervous system eventually recognizes as the new normal. And if this resonated with you, if something here shifted the way you see what's been happening in your life, leave a like and subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but because you're part of a field of people learning to hold a higher frequency together. Your presence here, your willingness to choose differently, it matters. It ripples. Share this video with someone who's feeling the same collapse, the same confusion. Sometimes all someone needs is permission to see their pain as recalibration instead of failure. And if you're ready for the next step, if you want to understand how to move through the full collapse of the old timeline without falling back into the pattern, the video appearing on your screen right now is exactly that. It's called, If You're Experiencing This, Your Old Frequency Just Collapsed into Your Highest Timeline, and it walks you through what happens when the old life fully releases and the new one begins to stabilize. This is the continuation of what you just learned. I'll see you there.